Thanks for sticking with us. So November, if you didn't know, marks the 9th month of the Russia-Ukraine war. It also means that Democrats and the Biden regime have now, for over a year actually, because the money started going before that, continued to send billions upon billions of our taxpayer dollars to what many left-wing media back in 2014 called the most corrupt country on the planet, Ukraine. Just for clarity there. Unfortunately, our money isn't the only thing that Biden's been sending over there. Now we've decided to send some troops, but hold on, I'll get to that. But a whole lot more military equipment and firepower. Which, oh, by the way, did I mention that a lot of it's been falling into the wrong hands? That's right. It's being sold on the black market. So now, the Biden administration just announced this week it has sent an undisclosed number of U.S. military personnel to Ukraine. The personnel's sole purpose is to inspect American-supplied weapons being used in that country. One of the main roles is for these weapons inspectors to try and determine how much of our U.S. supply has already fallen into the wrong hands. Great, so glad you're on top of it. 9 months later, Joe. What a joke. Why would he care? Look what he did in Afghanistan. Now, there's been no mention of how many troops have been sent or will still be sent over there, which is leading a lot of people in this country, of course, to start saying that Biden has broken his pledge, which he made a while back, of course, not to send any U.S. troops on the ground there. But do you really think you can hold Joe to his word? The guy can't string two sentences together. He doesn't remember what day of the week it is. He thinks we have 54 states. He said that, by the way, earlier this week. Anyway, what bothers me, and it should upset the hell out of you, is when will this end? When will we stop sending money to Ukraine? And now that we do have some boots on the ground, we can pretty much guarantee that we're escalating the war over there. I'm sure Russia doesn't appreciate that we have boots on the ground. Again, these aren't combat troops. They're weapons inspectors, but it's still American troops in country. But here's what I don't hear. Do you hear Joe Biden or anybody else calling for peace? Do you hear any major European partners in the EU or the UN, any of them, demanding both sides get to the bargaining table now? All we hear is death, death, death. Death to Putin. War, war, war. And if we continue to fund it, then how long are we going to drag this conflict out? Another 9 months? Who's paying the price here? The innocent Ukrainian civilians and the American taxpayers. That's who. Biden just announced on Friday of last week another $275 million in additional U.S. military assistance be sent to Ukraine. I've lost track. We were at $68 billion, but then there was a few billion 2 weeks ago, then a few million here or there. Then I can't keep track anymore. This is like the 24th time we've sent something to them since last fall, whether it's equipment, ammunition, or money. Joe just keeps sending aid and cash, but I don't hear anyone demanding peace. Now, you should know it's not just Joe Biden who's fueling this war. There are a lot of Democrats, and yes, some Republicans, who've signed off on even more and more cash and weapons. But listen to this. 30 of Joe's best Democrat friends just withdrew a letter that was sent 1 day prior calling on President Biden to start negotiating directly with Putin to end the war. Wow, you guys didn't have the guts to even leave it there for a day, huh? This congressional caucus says the letter was drafted several months ago, but unfortunately was released by staff to the White House without vetting it. That's why they pulled it back. Okay. One of the Democrats who signed the letter, Representative Sarah Jacobs of California, has said in the letter that we haven't seen, supposedly she said, quote, "We have to continue supporting Ukraine economically and militarily to give them the leverage they need to end this war." So the letter was supposed to be telling Joe to go see Putin directly and make them come to an agreement to end this war, while there's other people in the same letter saying, no, keep funding it? I don't know what the hell's going on here. Well, actually, I do. And I think you do too. But for more insight on what's happening with these weapons inspectors and how long this war can just be drug out by the Biden regime. We're joined now by the former advisor to the Secretary of Defense under President Trump, Colonel Doug Macgregor. Colonel, first let's start with the inspectors. We've known, because I'm pretty sure I had you on this program, we should have went and pulled the clip to show it and remind our viewers that we did say this, but I recall months and months ago, like springtime, you coming on, and we were talking about our weapons falling into the wrong hands. We're now just sending inspectors to figure this out. How much stuff have we spent and sent over there that's probably in Iran or China or God knows where now?
Well, Dan, that's an important question that we can't answer with any degree of accuracy, but we figure that probably 40% of whatever we've sent has disappeared into the so-called black market for arms. But there's something larger and more important happening here, and it's important that Americans pay attention. And look, it's difficult. Given inflation, open borders, the rise in criminality, Americans are justifiably concerned about those things as they go into this midterm election. But we need to look at what's happening with this so-called 200 or 300 troops under a brigadier general going into Ukraine. Suddenly, as you point out, after 8 months and over $65 billion lost on this Ukrainian fiasco, we are allegedly sending soldiers and officers to track accountability for weapons. Now, if that doesn't sound a bit bizarre at this stage of the game, then someone ought to step back and understand that this may be a cover for something else that's far more important. Remember, we talked about this idea floated by retired four-star Petraeus about a multinational force, a so-called coalition of the willing, of forces from nations that support our intervention in the Ukraine war on the ground, because it's not all of NATO, obviously. Well, this looks a lot like what we call an advance party. A group of people who are going in to look at where those forces might go, how they could set up, where they could be sustained, fueled, have power, and so forth. I'm frankly not buying the argument on accountability, because at this stage, why would we care any more than we did 8 months ago? So I think we're looking at something that's incrementally similar to what we saw with Obama in Iraq and then subsequently Syria. Well, I'm sending 200 men back to Iraq, but they're only there for a limited period to do assistance training and equipping and so forth. And then it became 400. Then it became 500. Then it was 2,000. I think this is an incremental move into Ukraine. And what worries me is all of the training going on in Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, to prepare foreign forces along with our forces to actually intervene in Ukraine. And we have American general officers talking openly, like the commander of the 101st, that his mission is a combat mission, not to protect NATO's eastern border, but a quote-unquote combat mission, which implies a fight with the Russians. Now, we have to understand the Russians have said very clearly, any movement across those borders into Ukraine will be interpreted by them as an act of war. But somewhere along the line, we've decided that Americans aren't going to be shot, that no Americans will be injured, or they're going to stay out of artillery range. It's a fanciful argument, because today artillery range is global. So this is nonsense.
Yeah. Wow. Doug, thank you. And you know what? You're right. Americans are distracted as hell right now. Whether it's the economy, they just raised the rates again, interest rates, right? Whether it's crime in their backyard that's happening everywhere now, or whether it's this stupid, not saying the attack was, but with a narrative on Pelosi's husband. That's, of course, all over the headlines. People are distracted right now. They're not paying attention to what's happening in Ukraine and what the Biden regime's doing there. So thank you, Colonel, for bringing this all to light and painting this picture for us, so we realize we better start paying attention. We better start calling our members of Congress and demanding they get answers from this White House about what in the hell is going on in Ukraine and just how much more money are we going to send over there, or troops. Colonel Doug Macgregor, as always, your insight is welcome again and again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dan.